Some ideas just sound excellent on paper. Like when we were kids, dreaming up the ultimate hero, the muscles of He-Man, the blazing lightsaber of Luke Skywalker, the fighting skills of Bruce Lee, and maybe the perfect hair of Lionel Richie. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, in the 80s, Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world, had the exact same idea. They set out to create the ultimate leader, brewed from the genetic recipe of history's boldest rulers, sharpest minds, and most ruthless egos. Turns out, blending together a DNA milkshake of conquerors and geniuses doesn't automatically make you a great leader, or apparently, a fashion icon. Oh well, just watch the video. This I command! If there's one thing in life that never changes, aside from death and taxes that is, it's change itself. And right alongside that comes the eternal chase for the next big thing. In the world of toys, that chase was constant. Every year, companies scrambled to keep things fresh. New faces, new vehicles, new gimmicks, anything to keep the kiddies hooked. G.I.Joe was no exception. Through the 80s, Hasbro rolled out wave after wave of new recruits and machines to keep the battle between Joe and Cobra feeling brand new. But by 1986, Hasbro decided to shake things up in a big way. After years of humiliating defeats at the hands of America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force, they felt that Cobra needed a serious overhaul, starting right at the very top of the proverbial snake ladder. For all his chrome-faced or hooded glory, Cobra Commander had his moment, and the powers that be decided that it was time for someone new, someone grander, not just a leader, not even a ruler, but an emperor. And so, out of equal parts creativity, desperation, and pure 80s marketing bravado, a golden god of genetically engineered ambition was born. An idea that Hasbro clearly thought was pure gold. His name was Serpentor. Deep within the darkest corners of Cobra's laboratories, a secret cabal of scientists gathered, working under the cold command of Destro and the ever-sinister Interrogator. Their mission? Nothing less than to reshape history itself. They scoured the tombs of ancient rulers, pried open the coffins of conquerors, and scraped at the bones of long-dead tyrants in search of the tiniest trace of DNA, fragments of greatness and madness. From these stolen genetic blueprints, they crafted a being unlike any other, a composite clone fused from the military genius of Napoleon, the ruthlessness of Julius Caesar, the daring of Hannibal, and the fiscal acumen of Attila the Hun, because apparently plundering Europe counted as financial strategy. Hey man, I'm not making this stuff up. It's in the file card. His eyes have seen the legions of Rome trample the Gauls and Nervae into the dust. His hands lifted the horsehair baton that signaled the first charge of the Carthaginian armored elephant phalanx. His ears have heard the rattle of French cuirassiers on the streets of Moscow. But it is his mind we must fear the most. The thoughts of the Cobra Emperor have not drifted from the global conquest since the reign of King Solomon. How's that for a proper introduction? That was straight from the file card that came with the original Serpentor figure. And right from day one, it was clear that Hasbro had their battle plan all mapped out, using their tried and true three-pronged approach. First, give the kids something shiny to grab off the shelves. A golden serpent-themed action figure that came packed with an equally gold snake-shaped, turbo-powered air chariot, complete with his own toy commercial, which even featured a personalized theme song.
Serpentor, the most evil foe of G.I.Joe.
Then, storm the comics, where Serpentor made his grand debut in Marvel's G.I.Joe issue number 49, leading directly into the landmark giant-sized issue number 50. And finally, bring him to life on the telly with the 5-part animated miniseries Arise, Serpentor, Arise. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into Serpentor's various debuts across comics, cartoons, and toy shelves, let's first take a step back and look at the concept of the Cobra Emperor himself. Because while his origin story might differ slightly depending on which version you're watching or reading, one thing stays consistent across the board: the idea behind him. As previously mentioned in the file card, Serpentor was the brainchild of Cobra's top minds, the weapons manufacturer Destro, and someone referred to only as the Interrogator. Now, everyone knows Destro, but the Interrogator? Well, that name tends to leave people scratching their heads. Turns out, the Interrogator was actually an early placeholder for a character who would later become Dr. Mindbender, the shirtless, monocle-wearing mad scientist who quite literally became the master mind behind Serpentor's creation. The end result? An individual engineered from the DNA of history's greatest rulers, tacticians, and conquerors, each strand contributing their most iconic traits, skills, and, let's be honest, a few of their worst habits too. And right off the bat, we're given 4 of the most famous names that make up this genetic cocktail, or as I like to call it, some Serpentor DNA pudding. Wait, that sounds gross. Let's just call it a milkshake. First up, Napoleon Bonaparte, the French military genius who, despite his small stature, possessed tactical brilliance and sheer charisma that could rally entire armies. Next was Julius Caesar, the Roman statesman whose ambition and political cunning turned a republic into an empire. And then we have Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian commander who marched war elephants over the Alps just to prove a point, bringing audacity and unorthodox thinking to the mix. And finally, Attila the Hun, whose ferocity and ruthless aggression earned him the nickname the Scourge of God. But as fearsome and impressive as those first few conquerors were, Serpentor was meant to be so much more. Cobra's science team wasn't content with just a handful of warlords. They wanted the ultimate emperor. So they tossed even more names into their genetic blender. From Alexander the Great, whose youthful ambition conquered half the known world before he turned 30, to his father, Philip II of Macedon, the mastermind who built the unstoppable army that made it possible. Then came Genghis Khan, the Mongol storm himself, bringing with him the raw force of relentless expansion and an unyielding will that bent continents to his command. But the recipe didn't stop there. For a touch of terror, they added Ivan the Terrible and Vlad the Impaler, rulers so cruel and paranoid that no one dared question their power. Mostly because no one lived long enough to. Montezuma II brought regal authority and divine conviction, while Eric the Red contributed a splash of Viking fury and explorer's grit. For a taste of the mystical, they mixed in Rasputin, the manipulative mad monk of Russia, and Geronimo, the defiant Apache warrior whose cunning and resilience kept armies at bay. And because no Cobra experiment could be complete without a dash of legend, they even spliced in the essence of Takshaka, the mystical serpent king of Indian lore, because really, what's a Cobra Emperor without a little serpent in his soul? And if that wasn't enough, both the comics and cartoons got creative with their own bonus ingredients. The comics threw in some ninja stealth and speed goodness with a few drops of Storm Shadow's DNA, and the Sunbow series added fictional warriors like Sanuthamoth Thoth, an Egyptian general, and Ulrich the Batterer, a Viking berserker, because why not? With that being said, there's one notable historical figure left out of this emperor stew, someone who really could have put things over the top. The perfect cherry on this Serpentine Sunday, Sun Tzu, the Chinese general strategist, philosopher, and author of The Art of War. The guy who literally wrote the book on military strategy, including Old Sonny, would have been a no-brainer. And believe me, at least in the cartoon, Cobra did try, but in the end, it just wasn't meant to be. During the global DNA hunt, which served as the backdrop of the miniseries Arise Serpentor Arise, Sun Tzu's genetic material was lost in a battle with the Joes, giving the good guys at least one small victory to celebrate. So in a truly inspired Cobra move, having lost what might have been the most crucial strand of DNA that could have tied everything together in a neat, tactical little bow, they went with the next best thing. a professional wrestler. Okay, to be fair, in the cartoon, Sergeant Slaughter wasn't just a wrestler. He was a larger-than-life Marine drill instructor, personally tailored to stand toe-to-toe with Serpentor himself. Still, that last-minute substitution would ultimately come to bite Cobra in the proverbial ass. Although, come to think of it, do snakes even have butts to bite? But I digress. Now, this brings us to the main event, at least in the cartoons. It all starts the usual way. Cobra Commander's latest brilliant plan of attacking the Joes with his new Cobra stunts and Cobra battle android troopers hidden in school buses is a bust, thanks to the timely arrival of Sergeant Slaughter, leading to yet another humiliating defeat at the hands of G.I. Joe. And with that, the Cobra Inner Circle has officially had enough of their chrome-faced leader's endless bumbling, leading Dr. Mindbender to take matters into his own gloved hands. Inspired by strange visions of shiny Christmas trees in his dreams, I meant swirling DNA strands, Mindbender hatches a bold, if slightly insane plan to create the ultimate Cobra Emperor using the genetic essence of history's greatest leaders. Naturally, Cobra Commander isn't too thrilled about this idea, but once he realizes he's been outvoted, all he can really do is sit back, seethe, and watch. And what follows is a global scavenger hunt that became a G.I. Joe miniseries tradition. A wacky race all around the world as Cobra, equipped with their trusty backpacks, gather DNA samples from history's most notorious conquerors, while the Joes do their best to stop them. Despite the constant interference, Mindbender manages to collect enough genetic material to move forward with the experiment, minus Sun Tzu, of course. And despite a little internal sabotage, courtesy of Cobra Commander, who secretly slips a special ingredient into the mix, a mutating virus that turns the first attempt into a horrific genetic abomination, Dr. Mindbender finally gets it right. Electricity crackles, machines spark, DNA swirls, and from the shadows of the lab, Serpentor arises, the ultimate Cobra Emperor. Well, sort of. See, apparently, the absence of Sun Tzu's DNA ends up being a pretty big deal. Without it, this Serpentor lacked discipline, patience, and any real sense of strategic restraint. Instead of a calm and calculated tactician, Cobra got an impulsive, hot-headed, rage-driven tyrant who made most of his decisions by yelling, "This I command," and hoping for the best. Fearsome? Sure. Intimidating? Definitely. But if we're being honest, this Serpentor was kind of a one-note character, all bark and zero chill. I mean, right out of the gate, he gets goaded into a one-on-one fight with Sergeant Slaughter. And yeah, fine, he takes his air chariot into battle, but let's be real here. Charging head first after a single Joe isn't exactly the kind of master strategy you'd expect from the self-proclaimed Emperor of Cobra. That being said, Serpentor's impulsiveness does set him apart right from the get-go. Without missing a beat, he rallies Cobra's forces for an all-out assault on Washington, D.C. Bold move? Yeah. Strategic genius? Not so much. Let's just say it earns him an E for effort, but a solid F in tactics. The plan falls apart fast, with G.I. Joe crushing Cobra on every front. And in the ultimate twist of irony, Serpentor is actually saved by none other than Cobra Commander, the very guy who tried to sabotage his creation in the first place. With flamethrower in hand, he prevents the Joes from capturing the Cobra Emperor, and ever the manipulator, the slithery Commander manages to weasel his way into staying by Serpentor's side, convincing the newly crowned Emperor that he could serve as the perfect scapegoat for any future failures. And so, for some time, that would be the status quo in Cobra. Serpentor sitting atop his golden throne, spewing out his commands, and Cobra Commander invoking his best impression of Starscream, and plotting his downfall from the shadows. Even stripped of his authority, the chrome-faced schemer wasn't about to go quietly, hoping to prove Benedict Arnold correct. He began cultivating a secret following within Cobra, a cult-like faction known as the Coil, made up of die-hard loyalists who shared his mission to dethrone Serpentor and reclaim leadership. And while this secret club didn't go anywhere in the cartoons, although there were supposedly big plans for it in the cancelled third season, the name Coil would be forever connected with other versions of Serpentor, but we'll get to those a little later. Eventually though, in 1987's G.I. Joe the movie, Serpentor finally seemed to rid himself of the pesky Cobra Commander once and for all. And more than that, the Cobra Emperor's origin story took a wild new turn, one that peeled back the scaly curtain on the ancient and controversial world of Cobra Law. But before we go there, how about we peel back the curtains of my channel, where if you want more, you can join my membership and become a friend of the Toy Shelf. All you gotta do is click on the join button on my main channel page, and for a super low price, like the cheapest that YouTube will allow me to charge, you'll get to enjoy channel shoutouts, early access, and exclusive content like reviews, collection tours, and stories on other toy properties. So why not give it a shot? This I command. But seriously, if it's not your jam, you can easily opt out. No harm, no foul. And as always, any way you choose to help me out will be greatly appreciated. So, thank you. So, apparently, all those dancing DNA dreams of Dr. Mindbender weren't just dreams. Nope, they were a part of something far older and far stranger. The movie tied Serpentor's origins to a hidden civilization of bioorganic beings led by the serpentine overlord, Globulus, who had secretly guided Cobra's rise from the shadows, a revelation that redefined not only Serpentor's creation, but Cobra itself. As the story goes, it was actually Globulus who had guided Dr. Mindbender's dreams, pushing him to create Serpentor as the next evolution of Cobra's rule. A perfect vessel through which Cobra Law could finally reclaim the surface world. And as for poor Cobra Commander, he turned out to be Cobra Law's first attempt, a budding scientist horribly disfigured by one of his experiments, given a chrome mask to lead Cobra into battle. And well, you know where this all goes, right? After multiple failures, Cobra Law moves on to Plan B with Serpentor, and the commander is punished for his failure and mutated into a literal snake. So, with Serpentor now positioned as Cobra Law's champion, the golden face of a plan millions of years in the making, it looked like his rule was truly unstoppable. Until the new star of the movie, the G.I. Joe Lieutenant Falcon, pulls off one of the greatest whoops, but it worked moments in G.I. Joe history as he jams Serpentor's cape into the rotors of his air chariot, sending the Cobra Emperor spinning around out of control and flying off into who knows where during the final climactic battle of the movie. Payback, actually, for the Cobra Emperor coming this close to killing Falcon's half-brother Duke with a snake spear to the heart. But don't worry, kiddies, Duke didn't die. He just slipped into a coma and conveniently woke up off-screen at the end of the movie. So, yay! And speaking of yay, after the movie, it wouldn't be long before the fans of the original Cobra leader would finally have something to celebrate. After Deke took over the cartoons, the once-a-man ex-leader Cobra Commander made a triumphant return in their debut miniseries, Operation Dragonfire. Decked out in brand new battle armor, Cobra Commander finally gets his revenge on Serpentor, using his new contraption, the Pythonizing Ray, to transform the so-called Emperor of Cobra into a giant iguana dude. Yep, a frickin' lizard. The mighty, genetically engineered conqueror, reduced to scurrying off into the jungle chased by the dreadnought poacher Naugahyde, talking about iguanas on the Barbie. Quite the unfortunate end for Serpentor in the cartoon, if you ask me. Then again, this version of the Cobra Emperor was far from his best incarnation. A guy whose coolest detail, the fact that he was literally connected to the greatest leaders in history, was rarely ever showcased. Well, except for that one episode called My Favorite Things, where Serpentor goes on a little nostalgia trip collecting ancient relics, statues, and weapons from his past selves, and even demonstrates the creepy cool ability to change his face to resemble them. But aside from that brief flash of brilliance, cartoon Serpentor mostly ended up as an annoying character, perpetually yelling, "This I command," to everyone within earshot. To really see what made Serpentor great, and honestly a far more effective leader, you'd have to turn to the Marvel Comics version where his origin actually starts off pretty similar to the cartoon. Now, there are a few tweaks, like in the comics their initial goal wasn't to replace Cobra Commander, but to create a kind of super soldier to help them win the war against G.I. Joe, which, I don't know, kinda sounds sus. I mean, you know what they say, too many emperors spoil the broth and all. And just like in the cartoon where they tossed in Sergeant Slaughter's DNA for that extra Cobra clutch, see what I did there? The comic version had its own unique ingredient. As I mentioned previously, the DNA of the former Cobra ninja, Storm Shadow, who had conveniently been gunned down on the shores of Cobra Island after fighting off a bunch of man-eating sharks a few issues earlier. Ever the opportunist, Mindbender had Storm Shadow's body put on ice just in time to stir in his ninja essence into the Serpentor stew, giving the Cobra Emperor a dose of mysticism, stealth, and speed. Plus, a little bit of modern-day know-how, you know, just enough to understand terms like skibbity and riz. I kid. By now, you should know how much of a kidder I am. Anyway, once Serpentor finally came to life, it didn't take long for things to get messy. See, right out of the cloning vat, Serpentor immediately started flexing that alpha energy. This wasn't some mindless creation waiting for orders. Nope, this guy came out fully convinced that he was born to rule. Right from the start, after donning his iconic serpent cowl, Serpentor showed everyone exactly who's the boss. Faced with the dire situation of the invasion of Springfield by G.I. Joe, Serpentor rallies the Cobra ranks with a fiery speech, citing the exploits of Leonidas and his 300 Spartans standing against the Persian king Xerxes' forces. He then leads from the front lines, shoulder to shoulder with his troops, not hiding in a bunker barking orders, but standing boldly under fire. And when a Cobra soldier is shot down, Serpentor risks his own life to carry him to safety. Then, after being shot himself, grabs a red-hot knife and cauterizes his own wound on the battlefield. No medics, no whining, just pure unfiltered badassery. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that wins hearts. Fast. Even the most jaded or lazy trooper would be swept up in the energy. And the results spoke for themselves. On his first major outing against the Joes, Serpentor acquired what Cobra Commander had never managed to attain: a victory. So yeah, not a bad debut for a guy literally cooked up in a lab. He did exactly what you'd expect from someone made out of history's greatest conquerors. He conquered. Veni, vidi, vici. Indeed. Speaking of which, Hama would actually pen a humorous short story that revealed a more personable side to Serpentor, where during an unusual dinner of grape soda, chocolate donuts, and frozen pizza served up by the Dreadnoks, the Cobra Emperor went down memory lane reminiscing about the time he invented pizza. Okay, fine, it was a random memory of Caesar, who during the siege of Alesia witnessed his men invent the first proto-pizza out of stale pita bread, meat scraps, oil, cheese, and olives. A simple concoction that boosted the morale of his legions, got them out of their tents, and back to fighting off and conquering the Gauls. Where's Asterix when you need him? Like I said, short story, but did a whole lot more for his character than anything ever in the cartoons. Anyway, random nostalgic memories aside, from there, Serpentor began to claw his way to the top of the Cobra totem pole, systematically dismantling Cobra Commander's grip on the organization. His victories stacked up fast, including one major campaign that ended with both Cobra Commander and Destro being conveniently buried alive in the rubble of the G.I. Joe base, the Pit. And with his rivals out of the way, the Emperor wasted no time transforming Cobra from a chaotic terror cell into a legitimate empire. He sold high-tech terror drones around the world and wrapped his operations in layers of politics and plausible deniability. He even set up a Cobra consulate in New York to exploit diplomatic immunity. I mean, this dude had his plans and schemes pretty laid out. That being said, you know the saying, the best laid schemes of mice and men often go awry. It's a proverb that highlights the unpredictable nature of fate, where hard work and planning can still be thwarted by unforeseen circumstances. And in this case, that unforeseen circumstance was none other than the return of Cobra Commander. Well, sort of. Just like in the cartoon, Cobra Commander eventually makes his grand return, also decked out in his shiny new battle armor. Hey, toy marketing synergy at its finest. Only this time, there's a catch. The guy under the helmet isn't the real Cobra Commander. You know, the one that Serpentor left buried under tons of rubble in the pit. That guy was currently 6 feet under the ground, and definitely not smelling like peppermint. But that's a story for another time. This new Cobra Commander was actually a Crimson Guardsman named Fred. Actually, they're all named Fred, but whatever. This particular Fred the 7th, happened to be the tech genius who designed the very battle armor he was now wearing. And thanks to the ever-ambitious Baroness who sees him as a convenient pawn for her own power games, Fred the 7th gets her stamp of approval and is officially proclaimed by her as the one and only Cobra Commander. Despite this unforeseen turn of events, Serpentor bides his time, tolerates the new commander, and continues to consolidate his control. But you can only keep two egos that big in the same organization for so long before something blows up. And blow up it does, into a full-blown war, a Cobra civil war, a chaotic, all-out battle for control of Cobra. The whole thing unfolds on Cobra Island, but for all its spectacle, yes, Serpentor really did strap the Baroness on the front of his tank. The war ends as abruptly as it begins, and quite definitively. With Cobra Commander's forces on the run, Serpentor, ever the greatest showman with his take-no-prisoners attitude, I mean, slavery is for wussies, am I right? Climbs atop his tank to rally his troops for the final push. Victory within reach, glory in sight, and then, from a distance, Zartan lines up his shot. One arrow, one eye, one fallen emperor. And just like that, Serpentor's reign and his story in the original Marvel Comics comes to a sudden, brutal end. And from here, we enter multiverse territory. See, after the original Marvel run wrapped up, its story was picked up years later by the next publisher, Devil's Due. That continuity kept the Joe saga alive for a while until IDW took over in the ultimate dick move, brought back Larry Hama to officially continue his version of events under their banner, making all of Devil's Due's work non-canon. That being said, regardless of which you prefer, both versions do share one thing in common. They both eventually brought back Serpentor. In the Devil's Due comic, the Coil make their grand return. Remember those guys? The secret cult Cobra Commander started to overthrow Serpentor back in the Sunbow days? Well, now they're reimagined as a full-on fanatical army completely devoted to resurrecting their fallen emperor. And resurrect him they do, along with a younger version named Hannibal and a batch of creepy child clones named Julius, Alexander, Genghis, Ivan, Attila, Vlad. You get the point. As a, well, sort of forward-thinking Serpentor continuity plan, this newly reborn Serpentor wastes no time at making an impression, immediately taking the fight to G.I.Joe and straight up killing the Joe, Damon. Don't worry if you don't remember him. Pretty sure the poor guy was created just to have his neck snapped for shock value. Sucks to be him though. Although, it sucks to be Serpentor even more, as this comeback doesn't last long either. His return sparks yet another Cobra Civil War, this time with the real Cobra Commander coming out on top. And in one of the most cold-blooded boss moments in all of Cobra history, the Commander outsmarts Serpentor with a booby-trapped helmet, then kicks him down a waterfall while declaring that Serpentor was always missing one crucial DNA strand. The Commanders. Mic dropped. Seriously, if you ask me, non-canon be damned, this is Cobra Commander's greatest line and one of his finest moments. Bar none. Anyway, despite supposedly not being a huge fan of Serpentor himself, Larry Hama couldn't quite resist, or maybe he was forced, to bring the Cobra Emperor back into the spotlight in his official continuity of the Marvel story under IDW. In Hama's story, Serpentor is inexplicably resurrected by a shadowy top-secret US government project to control and weaponize a giant alien eye. Yeah, just go with me on this one. Because, of course, someone thought it would be a great idea to bring back a genetically engineered warlord to control a giant alien eye. What could possibly go wrong, right? Well, everything apparently. Serpentor breaks free of his containment unit, 3D prints for himself a new serpent head helmet, and takes control of some giant Pacific Rim type robot. Yeah, in the end, it takes Hasbro ultimately sacrificing their cash cow, Snake Eyes, to take down the newly resurrected Serpentor, tackling him down a deep shaft with a live grenade and, with a blast, killing them both. But don't worry, after bringing in a second and a third female Snake Eyes, the OG one does come back, and apparently so does Serpentor, this time as Serpentor Khan. Okay, admittedly, I don't really follow this series of G.I. Joe, but apparently this dude is a resurrected clone of Genghis Khan in Serpentor's duds made to lead Cobra. I'm not sure if this one counts, but whatever. Aside from basically looking like Serpentor with facial hair, he's best known for setting off a mutant virus bomb that turns himself, Mindbender, and everyone on Cobra Island into cannibalistic monsters. Not unlike zombies, but less mindless. Yikes. Anyway, for those who know more about this dude, feel free to educate me in the comments below. Anyway, IDW also made their own unique and original G.I. Joe universe, which I guess was more real-world in flavor, but despite the absence of all that genetic cloning mumbo-jumbo, Serpentor, or a version of him, actually exists here as well. No longer a Cobra Emperor, but as a charismatic dude named Stephen Menashian, head of a worldwide organization called The Coil, that claims to offer wisdom and improvement for its members and runs drug rehab and famine relief organizations, while bringing in vast sums of money from its followers, which number in the millions, including prominent members of the celebrity circuit and commerce. Noble front aside, despite having no hard evidence or proof against them, the group is constantly accused of several missing persons never found, and the people who are found often refuse to go back to their friends and families. The Coil claims that it's of their own free will and their decision. Let's see. Charismatic leader, major celebrity endorsers, isolated members turned detractors. Where have I seen this before? I mean, seriously though, with a group symbol of a snake, an animal often associated with the devil, deceit, and generally creepy creature, and the name The Coil, I mean, you gotta know they're ultimately up to no good. And no good they definitely are up to. In reality, this version of The Coil is still a religious cult, the worshippers of an ancient serpent god named, surprise, surprise, Globulus. And Menashian serves the role of a messianic figure, the final disciple claiming to be the reincarnation of great conquerors. Menashian also serves as part of the Cobra Council, where he wields significant political influence, and the Coil functions both as an ideological wing and a punishment post where failed operatives could be reborn as fanatical followers and end up on the sacrificial table. Cobra, la, 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 la. All that being said, whether he's a literal clone comprised of history's greatest leaders, or a charismatic head of a creepy cult, a literal giant snake from the show Renegades, or a Cobra Decepticon love child called Serpen-toys, yes, that actually happened in another continuity. One thing is crystal clear: Serpentor is one dude you do not want to toy around with. But speaking of toys, why don't we get into all the Serpen-toys that have been released through the years, starting with the OG one in 1986. While I've already talked about this guy earlier, I thought it would be cool to throw in some bits of trivia connected with its creation. Some of the working names for Serpentor were King Cobra, Cobra Rex, Rama Set, and Zor. And according to figure designer Ron Rudat, he took inspiration from the character Thulsa Doom, the snake-themed villain from the Conan the Barbarian movie played by the legendary James Earl Jones. Sunbow's story editor Buzz Dixon also mentioned that Serpentor's origin was a compromise between Hasbro and the writers. Hasbro envisioned Serpentor to be an Agatha, Cobra Commander's secret superior, all along. To which Dixon objected to saying it contradicted established lore, and so he suggested two alternate takes. First, him being the creation of Cobra's inner circle who wanted a new leader, or Cobra being a front for a more secretive organization that eventually brings in Serpentor. Both ideas worked for Hasbro, and the rest is history. But back to the toy. Right from the start, I wasn't really a fan of Serpentor in general. Despite his flaws, Cobra Commander has always been my dog. Hardcore Team Coco here. So I never got the original Serpentor figure. My very first Serpentor toy would be the one released in the 25th anniversary line. And I have to say, Manation aside, I never imagined the great Cobra Emperor to be bald. I mean, didn't most of his DNA donors have healthy heads of hair? Oh well, on the bright side, at least he won't be needing any shampoo. Although to be honest, I couldn't tell you if I actually got this first single card release in 2007 or the special DVD set version that came packed with Dusty, a bat, and Montezuma's skeleton released a year later. What I am sure about is I didn't get the one that came with his trusty air chariot, released in a battle pack with a Joe Steeler piloting an armadillo. Talk about a major downgrade from the Mobat. I would have to wait even longer to get a Serpentor with an air chariot. But let me tell you, it was definitely worth the wait. In 2022, what many consider to be the ultimate plastic version of Serpentor was released in Hasbro's 1/12 scale G.I.Joe classified line as a special Hasbro Pulse exclusive, which basically meant two things. One, this guy came with a whole slew of accessories and switch-out parts, and of course, his air chariot. Unfortunately, being an exclusive, this also meant that he was a little bit harder to get. And at the time of his release, aside from not being a huge fan of Serpentor, I wasn't actually collecting classified yet. So yeah, when I inevitably fell into that rabbit hole, Serpentor had long come and gone and had shot up in price on the secondary market. Eventually though, the serpentine god Globulus smiled down upon me and I came across an online seller looking to unload his Serpentor along with an equally difficult to find exclusive Mindbender at a very, very, very reasonable and attractive price. I believe it was a little over $100 for both. I mean, seriously, nowadays you couldn't even get a loose Serpentor on his own for that price on eBay. And a boxed one, we're talking almost quadruple or more than what I paid for. So yeah, definitely money well spent. And speaking of spent, do you have any idea how much I've spent on G.I. Joe Classified alone? Well, that's one amount I don't want to think about. But if you want to take stock and check out my G.I. Joe Classified collection, you can find my 2-part walkthrough here. Or if you want to watch my latest story, you can check it out over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope to hear from you in the comments below. Go ahead and tell me your story. This I command.